Welcome, everybody. Let's begin with opening prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us to the first Sunday of this new month. Thank you also for bringing us to this meeting here today. Please help us to understand, remember, and to really think about the truths that you have given us and the truths that we are going to go over today. Thank you for calling us to be part of the 144,000. And thank you also for allowing us to be priests. Please continue to be with us during this new week and during this new month. In Christ's name, amen.
Welcome everybody to this YPG meeting. Today is June 4th, 2023, and this is meeting 121.
The title of today's lesson is 2023 Mid-Year Summary.
So in this lesson, we're going to review what we discussed in the past 5 previous YPG lessons, which is lesson 116 to 120.
Lesson 116, Attack on Democracy, was presented and published on January 1st of 2023. Next. In Attack on Democracy, we began by revisiting the events on January 6, 2021. On that day, Trump held a rally in Washington, D.C., where he repeatedly mentioned how the 2020 election was stolen and that he wanted his supporters to fight back, saying, quote, "Everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard," end quote. However, his supporters didn't have a peaceful plan in mind. Less than an hour after Trump finished his speech, his supporters were marching up the stairs of the Capitol, having overpowered the police. The rioters remained in the Capitol for a few hours, some of them wanting to arrest Pence for being a traitor, quote, or others threatening to kill members of Congress. Next. Normal Normal Trump voters weren't the only ones at the insurrection. Many of the rioters were part of extremist groups, some of which include neo-Nazis, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Three Percenters, and QAnon loyalists. Trump didn't make an actual effort to stop the violence at the Capitol. His messages sent on Twitter during the insurrection were a blend of encouragement and discouragement. In one sentence, he would tell his supporters to go home, but in another, he would repeat the lie that the election was stolen and that the rioters were special people. By 7 p.m. on January 6, which is a little over 5 hours after the insurrection began, police retook control of the Capitol. The goal of the insurrection and Trump's influence to begin the insurrection was simple. They wanted to overturn the results of the election. January 6th was the day the Congress planned to verify the votes from the 2020 election, and that would confirm Biden to be the next president. Trump believes that he won the election, and that's exactly why his supporters stormed the Capitol. They wanted their leader to stay president. Because of the insurrection on January 6th, next. Because of the insurrection on January 6th, Congress formed a committee to investigate Trump's involvement. At the end of the investigation, the committee referred 4 criminal charges to the Department of Justice against Trump. So they took 4 criminal charges against Trump and they said the Department of Justice should look into these charges. The 4 charges that they found Trump guilty of were, quote, obstruction of official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make false statements to the government, and insurrection, end quote. And that's from US News. So what do the events of January 6th mean for the United States? Next. We can revisit Acts 27 to answer this question. The ship of Adramyttium stopped in four locations: Caesarea, Sidon, Cyprus, and Myra, in that order. Each of those locations parallel the waymarks 1989, 2001, 2021, and the Sunday Law, respectively. Between Cyprus, which is 2021, and Myra, which is the Sunday Law, the ship sailed through the Sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, which represents the overturning of one entity and the rising of another. January 6th was a clear example of something overturning: democracy. A peaceful transfer of power and the acceptance of election results are essential to a democratic government. But when a president and millions of his followers are unwilling to abide by those rules, democracy can't last for long. And if democracy falls, what will rise and take its place? Dictatorship. An overturning and a rising beginning in 2021 was predicted in Acts 27. And right on time in January of 2021, democracy began to be overturned and dictatorship began to rise. And January 6th was a clear example of that.
Where are the Levites? So, lesson 117, we looked at a very important question. Where are the Levites?
You're muted.
Sorry, okay. So, on lesson 117, we looked at a very important question. Where are the Levites? In Ezra, in the book of Ezra, chapter 8, there are three groups of people: the priests, Levites, and Nethinims. The priests and Levites are Seventh day Adventists, and the Nethinims are not Israelites, so they represent people from the world. We know that these three groups each have a reform line, and one of the Levites, the line of the Levites began in 2001, which was their time of the end. After that, their 9/11 was 2014, their Sunday Law was 2019, 2021 was their close of probation, and their second coming will be the National Sunday Law in the near future. This means that we are in the harvest of the Levites between 2021 and the Sunday Law. In this lesson, we then looked at the parable from Matthew 13. From the parable, or from that parable, the parable of the tares, as it's sometimes called, we know that there are both wheat and tares, good and bad people in God's church. We applied this parable to the Levites for a long we applied this parable to the Levites. For a long time we knew that there were good and bad priests, but we assumed that the good Seventh-day Adventists were the Levites. This parable shows us that there are good and bad Adventists, and Adventist is the same thing as the Levite. But since we are in their harvest, we used to expect that a lot of Levites would join this movement. And since that didn't happen, a lot of people came up with different explanations to why the Levites haven't joined. Most of those explanations aren't correct, or like, well, yeah, most of them aren't correct. One of them, or according to one of the explanations, some people say that the priests have failed, but this movement is a movement of success, so that can't be correct. Others say that there are sinners in the movement, so the Levites can't join. But according to the parable of the tares, until the harvest on the line of the 144,000, there are wheat and tares in the church. And also, many are overthrown at the Sunday Law, which means there still has to be tares in the church. We then looked at an old study for 2014 that can help us actually explain why the Levites aren't joining. At that time, Elder Jeff started to teach about a subject from Exodus 40 and Isaiah 6. This is where this movement got the concept of no public evangelism from. According to the study, there would be no public evangelism until the Sunday Law. And since the Levites' harvest will look like this, we know that the Nethanim's harvest will look like this as well. This means that while we can do personal ministry, there won't be any big organized efforts, which is what many people imagined. Next, we looked at one last factor that could help us answer the question, where are the Levites? The threefold union. The threefold union is made of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Atheism, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And while they are a union, they do not work together. They don't even like each other. They are a union because of their beliefs in inequality, especially sexism, are the same. This is the external, but the priests, Levites, and Nethinims are the internal. This means that these three groups won't join together. The Levites and Nethinims won't join us, even if we have similar beliefs on equality. But the only way to be saved is to join this movement. Adventism and the world won't join, as we just saw from the threefold union. That means they won't be saved. This shows us that very few people will actually ultimately be saved. Of course, Levites and Nethinims can be saved on an individual basis as they come in individually, but the institutions of Adventism and the world won't.
Youth Prophecy Group Lesson 118 is titled Perils Facing the World, Part 1. We looked at 4 different categories of issues. The first was the war between Russia and Ukraine. Next slide. We began by talking about the sanctions being placed on Russia by countries who don't support its invasion. Examples of this would be Germany suspending a gas pipeline to Russia that would have brought a lot of money into the country. Putin also partially withdrew Russia from the New START program, which allowed the United States and Russia to inspect each other's nuclear weapons and limit the amount each country could have. Putin said that NATO members could no longer inspect Russia's nuclear weapons. All of this was in response to the invasion of and subsequent war with Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, and the next day countries imposed sanctions on it. The following month was the deadliest month for civilians. It wasn't until November of that year that Ukraine began to gain ground back from Russia. The second category that we looked at was China and its ruler Xi Jinping. In 2012, Xi was elected as president of China. His political career began in 1982 when he was made the deputy of the Communist Party in a part of China. Xi has caused many issues within the country. For example, he wouldn't let foreign-made vaccines be used. He also supports Russia in its war with Ukraine. Xi has no plans on stepping down from power anytime soon. The third category that we looked at was international threats like Iran. On September 14, 2022, Masha Amani was arrested by Iran's guidance patrol for wearing an improper hijab. She was then beaten and died 2 days later. This caused protests to break out across the nation. Streets were blocked with cars to stop the police, and clothing like hijabs were burned. The Iranian government responded violently, and hundreds of people have been killed and tens of thousands jailed. The majority of the protesters were women and Gen Z. Another issue Iran is facing is its crumbling economy since Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal, which also caused protests when it happened. When Biden became president, Iran refused to re-enter the deal without reassurance that the United States wouldn't simply pull out again. This is a problem for the United States because now Iran, that is supporting Russia, can build nuclear weapons, which it has already begun to do. The fourth category that we looked at was the issues within the United States and Canada. Simply put, Democrats and Republicans don't want to work together. The House of Representatives is controlled by the Republican Party, while the Senate is controlled by the Democratic Party. At a state level, some states recognize abortion in their constitutions, while others completely ignore it. Next slide. Another issue the United States is facing is inflation. The pandemic in China are the main causes of inflation, which has forced companies to lay off its employees and not be eager to hire new ones. And also we talked about Canada, because the United States isn't the only country where the political parties don't work together. But in Canada, there are more than 2 major parties. Canadians consume a lot of United States news, which is only fueling the issue there and is reflected in their politics. The parties are known to attack each other, such as saying that they are not democratic, and it is likely to get worse.
Lesson 119, which was Perils Facing the World Part 2, was presented and published on April 2nd, 2023. Next. In Perils Facing the World Part 2, we studied 5 more of the world's perils: energy, water, social media, AI, Generation Z, and equality. Firstly, there's the energy peril. The main source of energy, which is oil, is becoming more expensive. Many countries have stopped buying energy from countries from Russia because of the Ukraine war. And although Iran and China also continue to buy oil for Russia because they support the Ukraine war. Higher prices in oil has caused a divide to form between oil organizations led by Saudi Arabia and the United States' influence over oil. These conflicts and prices are causing energy shortages, which will result in food insecurity and social unrest. Next, there's the peril that we hear most about in liberal science and media, and that is climate change. The emissions from burning fossil fuels are causing the Earth's average temperature to increase. Because of higher temperatures, ice melts and sea levels rise. Higher sea levels threaten people who live on the coast with increased flooding. In drier areas, higher temperatures evaporate away the little water that is there. Water quality can also worsen in warmer weather because many microscopic organisms grow faster in the warmer climates. And those organisms, if they grow in the water, they can contaminate it. And on the subject of water, that's another peril that's currently facing the world. Rivers are drying up because of factors such as the increase of heat due to climate change. So rivers are drying up, and that can halt the shipments that sail through that river, and that can halt transportation as well. However, the main use of fresh water is for agriculture, and that means food insecurity will be a major effect of water shortages. The next peril the next peril that's facing the world is social media. In 2014, Cambridge Analytica used social media to create millions of profiles on people. They use on people specifically in the United States. They used these profiles to manipulate them into voting for Trump in the 2016 election. And if social media is powerful enough to get people to vote and get a president elected, then we know that that technology can be a very big threat if that social media is used in an extremely harmful way, some of which we see is already being used in a harmful way. And another threat that technology has produced other than social media is artificial intelligence. A specific type of artificial intelligence called generative AI can be trained on a large amount of data and used to generate personalized information. An extremely popular example of generative AI is a chatbot called ChatGPT. And while AI can be helpful in some situations, it can also be used to spread disinformation and impersonate people. Next, since we're on the subject of information and technology, let's talk about Generation Z. Generation Z is the first generation to be born in the information age. So they were born when the internet had already been created. Gen Z people are called digitally native. Gen Z has become a political force all around the world. In the United States, they worked to withhold the red wave in 2020. So they worked to stop the red wave and not get as many Republicans elected as the Republicans had planned on doing. Large portions of Generation Z get their news from social media, which creates a peril to the world if that social media feed is manipulated and filled with disinformation. The final peril we studied in Lesson 119 is the decline in global gender equality. Because of the pandemic, human development has declined. Women are now more likely to face violence at home and in public. They are more likely to be laid off from work or be subjected to unpaid work. The progress that has been made toward gender equality in the recent years has largely been reversed, and that makes this the most significant peril facing the world.
Lesson 120. Our main lesson called The Destruction of Trans Rights. In that lesson, we looked at the current situation of LGBTQ plus individuals around the world, but especially in the United States. First, we defined gender affirming healthcare. This form of care is used to help transgender and gender non-conforming people. Some of them some of them suffer from gender dysphoria, which is mental distress and anxiety because their bodies do not conform with their gender identity. Gender affirming care can take many forms like therapy, surgery, or puberty blockers. There are many states in the US that are attacking this form of care, which many transgender and gender nonconforming people need. Children are especially being targeted. They are being denied gender affirming care, especially puberty blockers, even though they are safe. The Republicans in one state, Oklahoma, are even trying to ban gender affirming care up until the age of 26. Healthcare for transgender people isn't the only thing that is under attack. We also looked at sports. Many conservatives believe that transgender girls, especially, have advantage over cisgender girls in sports, as in this example. So their ability to play on sports teams that aligns with their gender identity is being threatened or challenged. Idaho was the first state to ban transgenders from sports, and many states have followed. There are 22 in total now. This mostly happens in schools, but colleges are sometimes affected as well. On April 6th, Biden proposed a compromise. He said that transgenders couldn't be banned from sports outright, but he um, he left the option open that transgender youth could still be banned on an individual basis. So this is a compromise. It still allows transgender youth to be banned and discriminated against when it comes to sports. One of the biggest laws targeting LGBTQ plus people was actually passed last year, May 28th, 2022. That is, well, it's called the Don't Say Gay Bill, but that's not the name, in Florida. This bill bans public school teachers from speaking about LGBTQ plus issues like gender identity and sexual orientation. And it allows parents to sue teachers if they do speak about these topics. Many states have followed Florida's example on Florida's example on LGBTQ plus topics in schools. For example, Kansas allows parents to take their students out of lessons that are on these topics. In many states, schools are also banning books on these issues, making it even harder for students to learn about the LGBTQ plus community. Other states are not allowing students to use the bathrooms that correspond to their gender identity, and some are trying to allow teachers to use the wrong names or pronouns to refer to students. Like if the student wants to be referred to by a they pronoun instead of he, the school can tell the teacher they don't have to do that, and that can be very harmful. But we saw that this attack on LGBTQ plus rights isn't only happening in the United States. Many countries are facing these same issues. On March 21st, Uganda passed a law that will punish the supposed crime of homosexuality with death. And isn't the only country with that extreme of a law. So the LGBTQ plus community faces discrimination everywhere, and it has really escalated this year. We know it will continue to escalate because these are issues of gender, and that is the Sunday law test.
Does anybody have any questions or comments about the lesson or about just the message in general before the quiz?
Yeah, I have a question.
And
For Joe Biden, did he state that for the sports regarding the LGBT community?
state what for the support?
Oh, where he says that they can make their individual choices. So he's saying like the states can decide whatever they want. Is that what he's saying?
Not the states, it's the schools. So he said like the
Oh,
states can't put like blanket bans, the schools can't put blanket bans, but he didn't say that the schools couldn't just say, oh, you can't do this sport like individually.
oh, okay.
And this
And then
isn't,
there's
just a comment, that's
continue.
not technically a law. It was just like his opinion, a solution that he proposed. And it's, like I said, it's not a law yet. I don't know if it will become a law, but it's still an example of him trying to compromise to make both sides feel better. And both sides actually didn't like it because the conservatives, the liberals, none of them liked the decision actually. So, but yes.
Oh, okay.
So now it is quiz time, and we have one question per each of the lessons we summarized. So the question for the first lesson, which is 116, right? Yeah, 116. What is falling from 2021 to the Sunday law? So in lesson 116, we have an H. Lesson 116 was the lesson about January 6th. So what did we say was falling from 2021 to the Sunday law? We have another H, and we have another H. And that's correct. From 2021 to the Sunday law, democracy is falling, and January 6th was a clear example of an event in 2021 that marked the fall of democracy, or the beginning of the fall. Next question. This is a question from lesson 117. What is the counterfeit of the priests, Levites, and Nethinims? So remember, this was a lesson on the Levites, why they aren't joining the movement, and when they're joining the movement, if they are going to. So the question is, what is the counterfeit of priests, Levites, and Nethinims? We have a G, we have a D, and G is correct. The beast, dragon, and false prophet are the counterfeit of the priests, Levites, and Nethinims. And since the beast, dragon, and false prophet don't come together, like the papacy doesn't like Protestantism, we can't expect the institution of the Levites to join the institution of the priests. But they do join on individual levels basis. Next question. Question number 3, which is from lesson 119. What are the protests in Iran about? So if you remember, lesson 119 was about the lesson 119 was perils facing the world part 1, and we looked at some of the things that the world is dealing with. Specifically in Iran, what was the internal problems they were dealing with? I'm sorry, this is lesson 118. Yeah, 118. 118. So we have a B. To repeat the question, lesson 118, what are the protests in Iran about? And B is correct. The protests in Iran are about freedom and equality, among other things, but those are the main reasons they're protesting. Next question. Question from lesson 119. Did human development increase or decrease during the pandemic? Remember, lesson 119 was Perils Facing the World Part 2, and specifically, we looked at the peril dealing with equality. So did human development increase or decrease? We have an E and we have an C. So remember, this is during the pandemic. So do you think the pandemic increased or decreased? And decrease is the answer, which is E. Human development went down and equality decreased. And last question, which is from lesson 120, does Biden's proposed bill solve the issue of trans rights in sports? And we actually just had basically just answered that question at the end of the lesson. And we have an F, and we have another F. So to repeat the question, does Biden's proposed bill, well, the answer is no, it does not. So even though Biden says states shouldn't be able to make blanket bans on transgenders in sports, his bill still doesn't say that individual schools can make individual athletes not able to. No, let me rephrase that. States can't make blanket bans, or at least that's what he's saying. States shouldn't be able to make blanket bans, but schools can still ban individuals if they want from a person-to-person basis. So it won't completely solve the problem. So congratulations. Thank you for participating.
Next. So thank you everybody for coming. You can contact us at youthprophecygroup@gmail.com. And then you can contact us if you want notes, if you have questions for updates or for recordings. You can also visit our website, youthprophecygroup.org, for all of our previous notes, videos, and slides. Our next meeting is July 2nd. So the first Sunday of every month, of next month.
You're welcome, and let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us to this meeting. Please continue to be with us throughout the day and be with us for this upcoming week. Give us all the Holy Spirit and a clear understanding of this message so that we can be able to teach it to others. Thank you for teaching us equality, and thank you for calling us all to be part of the 144,000. We love you. Thank you for first loving us. Amen.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.